Hey everyone, today we're covering how to create detailed lights for our 3D car models. This is part of a series where I'm covering car modeling from start to finish. Today's video focuses specifically on simple modeling workflows for creating headlights and tail lamps. This series is targeted for beginner to advanced skill level in 3D modeling. Maya 2020.4 will be used for this tutorial, but the workflows can be applied to any 3D software as well as any version of Maya. So with that, let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Maya, and you can see, as usual, we have the progression of our models since part 1. This will be part 8, and we are now focusing on the headlights and tail lights. So you can see now I have detail headlights in here, so it's going to look really good when we start rendering, and then I have detailed tail lamps as well. Alright, so the workflow is going to be straightforward. The first thing that we're going to want to do is go ahead and grab our reference, right? So you can see, as usual, I'm continuously building up my mood board, my pure ref board, and you can see I've got some nice detailed shots here of the headlights here for this Datsun 240Z, as well as the taillights that you can find here. Now, I do recommend making sure to spend extra time specifically looking up whatever components that you're trying to model. You can see if you go ahead and just look online, you'll be able to find, nice isolated shots of the headlights and even, how it's built and put together. So this is going to be very helpful. All right. And I've also got some nice photography images as well that get really close up so you can see what the lights look like from all angles. So now that we have that, the next thing I want to do is cover kind of this pattern that we're going to be creating. And I was looking online and found a really good reference here, and I'll go ahead and reference the Tinker's Workshop blog, and he actually covers how to do this as a texture inside of Blender. Now I'm going to be going through the process of creating this as geometry in Maya, and that can be applied to any 3D software. Now, the reason I'm doing this as geometry is so we get more accurate light bounces inside of the render engine. So whether you're using Arnold, V-Ray, or whatever, or Blender Cycles, you're going to get more accurate and realistic lighting because we're going to be creating photorealistic renders of these. Now, if I was doing this for a game-ready model, I would, of course, use textures, but for this workflow, we're going to be creating geometry. All right, so I'm going to be bringing this pattern in here. Now, if I didn't have this, I would create this by hand, but I was lucky enough to find this from the Tinker's Workshop. All right, so if I go ahead and we're inside of Maya now, let me go ahead and hide all of our other parts here. And I want to now set up our pattern reference, right? Because we need to define the pattern. And in my ref group here, you'll see that I actually have this already set up on an image plane, and that's set up on this front camera view here. And it's already in position, set up, and ready to go. Now, as you can imagine, what I simply want to do is go ahead and create a plane that's going to be this size, right? So if I go ahead and create a plane, and then select and isolate my reference, I'm going to go ahead now and rotate this 90 degrees and put this in position here. And then I'm going to scale up this plane, roughly about this size here, and get this in position. Now you can simply select these. We should be able to go to Modify, Align Tool, and I like to just have this Align Tool here. And we should be able to go ahead and align those properly. Now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and set these to, not height and width to 0, but I will go ahead and set the subdivisions to 1. So we have something like this. All right. And I will bring this forward now, just like so. And the reason why is so I can start out with just manually going through and using my multi-cut tool, and we're just going to start cutting in these patterns, right? So I'm going to do that for all of this here, and all I'm doing is using my multi-cut tool. So you can hold Shift right click like so. So let me go ahead and re-enable that tool. So in edge mode, I go Shift right click, multi-cut, and then I can just start cutting in all of these lines. Now, I'm not doing the vertical lines yet. I'm only doing the horizontal lines. All right. So with this, I go ahead and do all of this, and this is going to give me a nice clean pattern. Now, this is not a symmetrical piece, so I cannot use symmetry here. So I have to make sure to do all the pieces by hand. But you want to make sure just to really include all of the horizontal lines. Now, I've gone ahead and already done this, but I just wanted you to kind of see how I set that up. Once I have the horizontal lines, I then go ahead and do all the vertical lines like so. All right. And you can see that I'm just going through and, making sure I have all of these patterns. Now, I'm doing this so it's all nice and it's going to fit tight together and looks like it was all manufactured from one piece, right? So I'll go ahead and unisolate that, jump to perspective, and I'll actually go ahead and just quickly show you the lights themselves so you have an idea of what we're trying to achieve. So if I hide this, and now you can take a look, you can see how this looks good, how it looks like it's on one defined piece here. And if I were to go ahead and throw like a solid material on that, you can see how that looks like now, and don't need a smooth preview that, right? So we're not smoothing this. All right, so this is going to give us that really nice refraction, those light bounces, and it's really going to give us that really nice detail in here when we're rendering this from any angle that we have throughout. Now, you will see different types of patterns, like the Dat Sun gets modded pretty frequently, so I just kind of found one that looked pretty close and worked off that pattern. You can see there's longer horizontal or longer vertical lines and different patterns, and even for the Sun Kang's model here, you can see that he does have kind of the traditional headlights here, but he did, he was going back and forth and he actually put some LEDs on it. So there's a couple variations that you'll find. So I'm just going with the standard one that you'll typically find on nice classic vehicles. All right, like the Mustang, 67 Mustang and whatnot. All right, so I am going to save you the time. I'm not going to go through and cut up this plane into all the pieces. I've already have that done here. So I'm going to hide this real quick and let's go ahead and jump to where I have everything kind of cut up. So again, all I did was go through and add in all of the lines. And then just so we're on the same page, once I do that, I go ahead and select faces like so. And then I run in extract. Once I extract, I clean up the edges here. And then I can go ahead now and use the connect tool. So I grab these and then I grab connect, and you can middle mouse drag like so, and you can add these throughout. And you can see that this works really well. So it is a bit of a tedious process, but it's going to give you the best results. So here you can see I can go ahead and connect and create larger panel pieces, right? And just want to make sure to do that and hit Q, and there you go. So you just do that over and over again, extract, connect, and then you do that just to make sure that matches and lines up with our reference image. So, like I said, if I go ahead and grab the two pieces, you can see everything's lined up pretty well here. All right, so this is the plane here. So everything's good, ready to go, and then now ready for extrusion. So once I do that, and you're ready to start adding detail, I would then extrude by face. How do I do that? You can do this really all at once. Select all your faces, and they can be separate objects. That's completely fine. Hold Shift right click, extrude. We're going to move out on the normal just a little bit. And I ended up using something like 0.1, 0.15, something like that. And then we're going to use offset, okay, by a small amount. But here's the trick, right? Because I'm doing this by face, you'll notice that I don't have extra geometry yet, but I do keep faces together off. Now look at that. I mean, this is basically the main step right here, right? So you have to make sure that you go ahead and have all of these as separate faces, and then it's going to work it's going to work correctly, right? Now for these thinner pieces, I go through the process of selecting these and manually setting these to a little bit of a smaller of an offset. So if I have the local translate at 0.15, I'll do the offset at 0.05. And there you go, right? So that's giving us that nice different looking pattern. And you can mix this up however you want, right? It doesn't have to match the image, but it just gave us something to refer to, all right? So once you do that, then we can refine, right? So I am going to go ahead, shift right click, soften, and then I'm going to harden edge, okay? Once I have hardened edge, then I can do something by refining this geometry. So here's another tedious process, but it's going to give us that nicer detail. If I go back to our modeling toolkit, multi-cut, middle mouse drag here, and hold Control, middle mouse button click. Okay, Control, middle mouse button click, and I'm just adding one right in the middle, just like so. All right, so I can continue to do that and grab my multi-cut tool and continue to do that. And this is going to give us, again, really nice detail on our model. Right? And I can remove this one, didn't mean to add that. And then I can select these pieces, go into multi-component mode. I can select the edges. So then I would go through, I would select these edges here, like so. And this is going to help give us a little bit more geometry, a little bit more detail and curvature on our model. You can just manually, boom, just move this out. Right? Or you can be a little bit more precise if you want and use something like transform component. And in the channel box, I will go ahead and select these. And I will find this. I want to just move this in the translate Z, something like that. So you can type in those values if you want to be precise. Or like I said, you can just grab these and move these like so. And that's going to give you a nice set of curvature. So that's a way to go with different width and thicknesses. This is a way to get nice curvature. And this is how I did the refine step here. So if I go ahead, hide this, and I'll bring back refine, and here's what I did, right? So you can see on the thicker pieces, I went ahead and added these extra pieces of geometry, these extra edges here to give us just that nice different deformation. And all of this is coming from our reference, right? So if we take a look, you can see that, you know, some of them are flat, some of them are curved. So, and they can be squares, they can be long rectangles. It really doesn't matter, right? You just find a good piece of reference and you just work off of that, right? So then once we do that, we need to go through the process of course, having this go inside of our lens. So if I bring back our lights here, you can see I have the housing of this here, and I have the bezel as well. Very, very simple. All I did was just take this piece of geometry. So for example, if I grab a cylinder, I'm going to bring this, a sphere, and I'm going to, set this to a much larger radius. And I'll set this to my usual 16 subdivisions, just so we have a factor of 4. So it's easy to optimize later if need be. I will then align this like so, rotate this forward, and then we have this, right? So now that I have this housing, I'm going to actually go ahead and delete the backside. And then because the pivot is here in the middle, I can then nicely scale this down. And this gives you a really, really nice lens cover. Then from here, I can extrude this out by holding Shift Move and then Shift Move again, right? And then scale this down and then extrude again. But this time I'm going to give it an offset, and then I will just go ahead and do a merge collapse edges to center. And there you go. Now I can make sure to just scale these so these are planar. So I'll go to the vertices, scale these to be planar. And then if you want, you can give it a little bit more detail, and you can even add like a little, nice little bulb in there as well. And here we are. Right? So that's how I did this. And then to get the bezel piece, I would just simply extrude face on here and move these out like so. Then once we have all of that, I can go and add my holding lines and add in whatever geometry. I'm going to select those edges actually and detach component. So then now we have this, and I can run now a mesh separate. So shift right click separate, and there you go. All of these are separate pieces. We have the housing, we have the chrome bezel, and then we have the lens. And if you want, you can of course give this chrome housing thickness, or so if you look on the inside, it's black because the normals are facing outwards. It really depends on what you want to do. I can select the faces here, face normals, reverse normals, like that. And then I can add in those holding lines like I was talking about. And add one here on the face. Extrude, and just a little bit of an offset. And then just kind of control middle mouse with multi-cut, and then just add those there. So subdivides nice and even. So that's how we go ahead and create this. And it's going to look really good. So I'm going to hide this. And then now that we're back here, right, this is going to go on the inside of our lights. And while I'm inside of these lights, you'll see that I have the initial lens here. And then I have the pattern and the diffusing pattern here. So if I go ahead and select this, you can see it's actually deforming. It's not a flat surface. This is going to give us even more accurate lighting, right? Now, how do we do that from where we last ended up, which is here, right? Once you get to this point and you've refined it and you're happy with all of this work, we need to just simply add in geometry for deformation, right? So if I select all of these, go to my multi-cut tool, jump to edge tool, or edge mode, and then multi-cut. Now I can go in and just start middle mouse clicking just to add that division. Now you want to be, so this deforms properly, you do want to line up these edges here, right? Because you don't want to have, for example, an edge here and an edge here, because then if you do that, these aren't going to line up when you start deforming. Okay, so it's again one of those little tedious things that you got to do with your edge flow, but it's definitely worth it, right? So I go ahead and add it here and add in these edges, and then what I end up doing is, scaling these down, then using V for vertex snap, and then just snap to this vertice like this. So that means that I can do that across all of these different edges, and I don't even need to make sure that they're perfect because I'm going to select everything. Like so. Scale tool. Actually, let me grab this last one so you can see it in action. Select this, edge here. So we're just going through on all these pieces. Scale this down. And we get that. And there you go. Now, if they were for whatever reason off center, no big deal. You can just hold V and vertex snap these so they're perfectly aligned. All right, so you're going to do that. You're going to go through and add in all these extra pieces of geometry, making sure that they're all lined up to all of these edges here. So you can see this one has 3, right? So I go through and add 3, and then I add in and split that one. So I'm going through and doing that so it all deforms together nice and evenly. And I already have that done here. So if I go ahead and hide this piece, I have add deformation for Geo for deformation, and there we go. So this is all ready to go, nice and even. And then once I have all of this ready to go, then I can throw on the deformer. Okay, now there's, you can combine all of these if you want. So let me go ahead and duplicate this, Shift P to unparent, then Shift right click. Let me just combine these. You can apply deformers to group nodes, group levels. That's completely fine. So I'm going to just get rid of all these guys since their history has been deleted. All right, so once you have this, we can go ahead now and go to deform and do a nonlinear bend. And let's just see the orientation of this. Right now, it's slightly at an angle here. So what I typically would like to do is just make sure that everything's good here and everything is flat. You can see that there is a little bit of a rotation here. I accidentally rotated that, so no big deal. I'll go ahead and kind of put that back where it needs to be, freeze transforms, and we should be fine. So if you did it planar, you shouldn't have to worry about that step. But again, go to Deform, Nonlinear, Bend. So there, everything's looking good. Then give this a curvature, right? Now it's curving or bending the wrong way. So then I need to curve it and rotate it 90 degrees the other way. And one of the things I love to do with this bend tool is you can stack bend modifiers. So you see how I have it bending this way? Well, to get more of that spherical dome, you can apply another bend. So if I go to Deform, Nonlinear, Bend again, this time I'm going to go ahead and, not rotate it, but I will go ahead and give this a bit of a curvature. And I will rotate it 90 degrees this way, and then 90 degrees this way, which is in the Y and Z. And there you go. You get this nice kind of spherical rotation, and the values that I ended up using was just 20, a value of 20 for the curvature. So you can see here 20 and 20, and there we are. So there, so now we have this nice piece here. Now the last step that we have to do is, of course, cut this out. So there's a couple different things you can do. You can manually cut it if you'd like. So to get that spherical shape like so. So I'm gonna, I'll go ahead, scale this up a little bit. Then I will grab the light that we have here. So we want to get this kind of in position now. So move this like so. And what I end up doing is, I'll just go ahead and take this cap here and move this like so. And then I can, grab this edge here and just extrude that edge. And I will go ahead now, delete that cap and bring this in. And I'll go ahead and I will then apply, another material like so. Okay, so we have this, and I need to scale down this cylinder piece here, of course. So I'll go ahead and center pivot to there, bring this down. Then I can subdivide this. Now I know I'll be subdividing the main housing twice, or 2 divisions, so I'll subdivide this with 2 divisions, all the same. And I just want to move these vertices here, because what I can do now is just do a simple Boolean. Now what I end up having to do is I would highly recommend duplicating this piece of geometry, hiding it, taking these 2 pieces, deleting history, freezing transform, make sure everything's clean, and then we can go ahead and do our Boolean. Alright, so the key thing that I need to bring up is that the Boolean tool can be pretty clunky sometimes, and it doesn't like doing Booleans with one-sided geometry. So what I need to do is just temporarily give this thickness. So if I extrude the panel or the diffuser, and then I'm not going to do it on the normal because it's going to get all messy and nasty. I'm just going to simply move this like so. So now we have some thickness here. Then I will flip the normals, face normals, reverse normals. Then now I can delete history, select this thickness, geometry with thickness, and the cylinder. And again, I will go to Mesh, Booleans, and I want to use intersection. Then you get this, and it goes ahead and gives you these empty pieces, and no big deal. I can now go ahead and delete the thickness that we have here. So I'll go ahead and do that by just simply kind of selecting these faces like so, and then deleting it. But I have to clean up the selection, so I'll go ahead and do that. So as I'm cleaning this up, you can see there's big holes here. Well, that's why we duplicated this other piece of geometry, right, with the Bend Deformer. So I'm essentially just going through now and creating a nice little puzzle piece, right, that's just going to go through and select the missing pieces, and then I can recombine them with what we have here. Okay, and so I would then duplicate or delete that, and then you're left with a whole piece like this. Okay, so that is the overall workflow. I'll go ahead and throw this back in my lights demo folder, and I can now pull up the original light, and that's how we ended up here. So keep in mind, I also did give this thickness just in case, but I can easily delete the back sides of these. So overall, really happy with how this is looking, and it's going to look really nice once I start lighting this with whatever render engine that we're going to use, the chrome interior, the chrome bezel, the clear refractive material, and it's going to give you those really, really nice bounces. Now for the tail light, I'm going to cover that real quick high level. It's the overall same workflow here. And what we do is we just go over here, and this one, is a little bit different in the sense that I start with just nice flat planes. So you can see in my whip folder, I created these planes here that have these patterns. So I have a large, medium, and small patterns, just like so. And as you can imagine, all I'm doing is grabbing a plane. And if I go ahead and add the height and width, I go ahead and I believe I did like something like 80 by 40. And rotate this in position, -90. So you get something like this, right? So that's how I have this, right? And then once I have the overall size, I can then make sure my subdivisions are essentially equal that here, right? So if I do 80 by 40, or, if I do 60 by 30, you just want to make sure that your width and height, they're basically double each other, right? So I can go 40 by 20. I'm always ending up with even squares. Okay, that's the key thing here. You can see we have larger squares, medium squares, and tiny guys. And, I can leave these, maybe I'll do 80, 40, and I'll duplicate that, grab this plane, and set it to something, even smaller, like 200, 100, right? And we just use the exact same technique, guys. We select this by faces, and we do extrude face, but this time, again, we make sure that we keep faces together off, extrude slightly, offset slightly, and there we go. Now, this is real tiny. So if you want this like rounded effect here, I would probably go ahead and double extrude this. So I can do like maybe 0.15 and then hit G to repeat again, and just ever so slightly bring this out and offset this again to, something like 0.15. So then you start to get this nice round effect. Look at that. That looks very, very close to what we have here, right? And you want to make sure, of course, to soften, harden edges. So I will, soften, harden with an angle probably of 35. And then there you go. That looks really, really clean, right? Now, the other method is going through and taking this like so. Let me grab this last plane. And instead of doing kind of those square pieces, if you want something like this, where there's like little diamond patterns, you'll see that a lot on taillights, is again, extrude, turn these off, offset, and thickness. Maybe not thickness, local translate. There we go. Right? So I'm going to give this like really small value, like 0.1, and offset. I think I ended up just using, probably 0.15, 0.2, basically 0.2, right? Because that's going to give us this diamond pattern. Then I go ahead and grab these, merge vertices, and do these really small, like 0.001, 0.003, and there you go, right? And again, I would do, soften, harden edge, and you can just do like a harden edge on this one, and look at that. You get that really, really nice pattern. Okay, and I then go through and cut and boolean all the same. I'm going to quickly show a time lapse of this so you guys have an idea of how I created this, because the other thing is I did go ahead and update the taillight to be this modular component, which I haven't covered, so I'll be sure to cover that in the time lapse. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump over that. Should only be a few minutes, and then we can wrap this video up. All right, so here we are. You can see I'm going through and adding in that bezel. So I'm breaking up the solid piece of taillight geometry now. And I'm using that double bevel workflow that I use throughout the modeling series. And this is going to give me nice, clean, straight lines. And once I do that, I extrude back, clean up the extrusions a bit, connect the geometry, and make it look like it's a solid, nice 3D solid piece of geometry. Previously, it was just one-sided, so that's why I have to go through this step of extruding back. I use, the modify pivot with D, and then snap the pivots and move the vertices. So I go ahead then and grab the top pieces of that bezel too, and then I add it to those taillight pieces. Once I do that, I go ahead. Now I'm just doing some simple extrusions. I'm moving the edges, just getting the right form. Once I do that, I go back and forth a bit, and I just add in those holding lines. Now I'm finally getting to the point where we just covered right before the time lapse, where I'm creating the 3 different variations. So the small, medium, large patterns. So we're going to have the small, medium squares, or the medium, large squares, and then the tiny patterns. So I need to break out the reverse light, so I need to do that before going any further. Clean up the geometry, add thickness, duplicates that face, and then reverse normal, add it to the other side. So I've been doing that over and over. It's just a nice way to get good, clean seam lines. Then I go through and use the same workflow that I just showed you, which is extruding by face and getting a nicer, double extrusion to get those nice rounded squares. And then I'm just setting the smoothing angle or softening edge on that. I then duplicate the pieces of geometry for the lens covers, and I use that for my boolean. So you can see it cuts out really nice and easy. And then I just move forward and do the same thing with the reverse light now. So I go through, extrude by face, double extrude, set the soften edge, smoothing angle, make sure everything looks good, create the boolean cutout for geometry, and then I go and add this last square piece that's just kind of an inset on that. These are the tiny little diamond patterns, and I go through and just use the nice triangle pyramid type effect. Clean up the geometry, make some final adjustments, and this is where we ended up. Okay, that wraps it up. So I hope you guys found this useful, and you can see that I use the same effect on the front lights as well. So make sure that I don't have smooth preview on those. Those do not need to be subdivided, right? They're just there to create that nice effect for when we start bouncing the light and everything. So everything's looking really good. Now remember, you do need to make sure that you soften edge and everything looks good on the geometry. So that's where you would go through and do a soften edge at the end with a specific angle of like 30, 35, 40, and just kind of pick whatever looks good. All right. So again, if you have any questions, comments, tips on workflows, let me know down at the bottom. But we are almost done, and I'll probably cover badging or the final door handle effects, and we'll finish the video with UV mapping probably in part 10. So thanks again for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying this, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.